Is Pastor Donnie Flippo of Gospel Center Church. Everyone, please silence your cell phones, and if you choose, please stand. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, council members, allowing us this opportunity to realize that our Creator is watching all our actions and the things that we do. So thank you. Father, thank you for this day. We come to you in the name of Jesus. We thank you for your love and your mercy. We thank you for life. We thank you for this wonderful city. Thank you for the people of this city. Thank you, Lord, that you've given us wise counsel. Those that sit upon the platform today, they're here to serve the people. I want to thank you, Lord, for their time and commitment that they take from their family, their career, to come and to serve others. So I ask today, Lord, and I'm reminded of the scripture. You said, if he that lacks wisdom, let him ask of the Lord. So today we're asking for wisdom into making the sound decisions that would affect this city, that would help the people, that it may lift the burdens and not become a burden, that it may give insight and may give encouragement and strength. Father, I pray for your counsel. You said, you tell us in your word that if we should lean not to our own understanding, but if in all our ways we'll acknowledge you, you will direct our path. So we ask today that you direct our paths in the decisions that need to be made. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Please join us in our nation's flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. May I have the roll call, please?
Mayor Mouton,
Present.
Mayor Pro Tem Samuel,
Present.
Councilmember Neild,
Present.
Councilmember Getz,
Present.
Councilmember Turner,
Here.
Councilmember Feldshaw,
Present.
Councilmember Durio.
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you, and I have one proclamation today, and the proclamation is for the Public Service Recognition Week, and I will read it as follows. Whereas Americans of this great nation are served every single day by public servants at the federal, state, county, and city levels. Whereas the city of Beaumont has more than 1,300 employees in 13 operating departments who serve our citizens in various capacities, many of whom face daily challenges such as water utilities, streets and drainage, personnel, and there are those who risk their lives daily, particularly our fire, police, and EMS personnel, to provide needed and emergency services to our citizens. And there are those in the military who risk their lives to serve our nation across oceans to protect the freedoms of all citizens. Whereas without these public servants at every level, communities would be impossible in a democracy that regularly changes its leaders and elected officials. Whereas City of Beaumont employees are dedicated each day to serving our citizens and fulfilling our mission to provide quality services in a professional manner. Now, therefore, I, Robin Mouton, Mayor of the City of Beaumont, am proud to hereby proclaim May 9th through the 13th of 2022 as Public Service Recognition Week in Beaumont and encourage all citizens to recognize the accomplishments and contributions of government employees at all levels, federal, state, county, and city. Accordingly, I have hereunto set my hand and caused the seal of the city to be affixed, signed, Robin Mouton, Mayor of Beaumont, today, May 10th, 2022, and accepting this recognition and proclamation, Chris Catalina, City of Beaumont Personnel Director. Thank you. Please come forward and bring your team members with you. Thank you.
Congrats. Congrats.
Thank you.
Congrats.
Thank you.
How you doing, all right?
Thank you.
How you doing?
Thank you. We're shaking hands. I just realized it. Thank you. Thank you.
How's it going?
Thank you. Thanks for all y'all do.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. What the keys doing?
Good afternoon, Mayor, Council. Appreciate the proclamation. We have a great workforce here at the City of Beaumont. Many great employees, and it's a great thing to do and honor them this week. We had staff put together a lot of fun events beginning Monday and through Friday. We have ice cream this afternoon. Jackie Gunner and personnel coordinated the entire week, so I appreciate her and the committee members. I'll let her say a few short words about the week, and thank you so much again.
Thank you.
Mayor and Council, thank you so much for the honor and privilege to be here recognizing Public Service Week. Although the actual week was the first week in May, we wanted to do it this week as we celebrate this every other year. So there are new members to our committee that never actually had the opportunity to experience this, especially due to COVID. And we wanted them to actually have the opportunity to be able to come and be recognized here in Council today. We hope to see you at the rest of the events for the week. It's an opportunity for us just to say thank you to all of our employees that work tirelessly for the city, and we appreciate everything that they do, because without our field employees, without all of us, we all are in this together, so we're so ever grateful and thankful.
Thank you.
I have a question, Mayor. Who had the idea of decorating the doors? I've seen two of them. What other departments have the doors decorated because they're cute?
So we have a few departments here in City Hall. We have Central Collections, Water Customer Service, the door and HR on the first floor. We have engineering as well as community development on the second floor. And then the city attorney's office and finance have their doors decorated. Outside we have, did you say the executive? I'm sorry, the executive office too, I'm sorry. We also have outside, we have the fleet division that participated, as well as water quality, water, and recreation and parks. So a few other, municipal courts and event facilities, sorry. The idea, I'm sorry. The idea, we had some, it was a community effort, but Larissa Ali from Recreation said a couple of years ago there was a competition with the centerpieces, and it seems that one department had a leg up over others, so we were like, hey, everybody has a door, so we'll see what works.
Good job.
Great idea. Any other comments? Well, thank you all so very much for everything that you do daily, because as we said, people risk their lives on a daily basis, and without public service workers, cities would be nothing. So thank you for all of the work that you do, and you're greatly appreciated.
Mayor, before you go, the door contest is a contest. You can vote for it on our Facebook page. The legal department does have the best door. So I want to encourage all the citizens to go and vote for that.
Well, thank you. Thank you so very much. And again, thank you all so very much for everything that you do. Appreciate it.
Contest is heating up.
Yeah, look like this contest is heating up. Well, we do have a presentation today. And I'm going to go ahead and ask for you to please come forward. We have a presentation for the redistricting. Thank you so very much.
Thank you, Mayor Mouton, City Council and City staff, City Attorney, and the citizens of Beaumont. My name is Rezin Pullum, and I am here on behalf of the Borkes Law Firm, firm that you guys engaged to help conduct this redistricting process for the City of Beaumont. One thing in the time that I've been here, I could say I'd probably come down here for free of charge just because the food is so good. So I really do love the food here. It reminds me of back home where I'm from. I'm from Tyler, Texas, and a lot of the same kind of community vibes, and downtown looks much the same. You see here my bio, just quick and short. I graduated law school from Thurgood Marshall School of Law.
Yo.
Yeah, I knew I'd hopefully get some support on
Yes,
that.
sir.
But also went to University of Houston, where I received my bachelor's degree. And I've been serving as an attorney and a part of Texas City Attorney Association. One thing that I was able to do that kind of gave me some experience in election law in this field was be a presiding judge in the presidential elections for Harris County and a few of their special elections over the last 2 years. So try to expert that knowledge in this field. Today we're talking about the redistricting for the city of Beaumont. So on our agenda for this presentation, what we'll be covering is, what is redistricting, how and why we do it, and then we'll also discuss the initial assessment, which is the city's existing districts and the numbers from the April 1st, 2020 census data laid upon those districts. We'll also discuss the resolutions that will need to be passed that establish the criteria for this redistricting process. It's carved out of the case law and a lot of the components in which we are required to follow under the law. So first, starting with what redistricting is, it's essentially the redrawing or changing of the electoral ward boundaries. This occurs at every level, the federal, state, and obviously the local level. It's based on the U.S. Census that's taken every 10 years, and the most recent one was taken on April 1st of 2020. So what they did is try to get the approximation of the population of each city and count each resident in all of the cities and give that data to the city so they're able to create equal proportional districts to give everybody the same voting power under these electoral systems. What it's about, some of the veterans in redistricting or that's been a part of council and say it's about math, it's about numbers or lines on a street, even about streets. But really what it's about the people. It's about those of you who elect these representatives, being able to have a neighbor represent you amongst this board and council, and to just be able to speak for yourself, but also have those speak for you, making sure that they're neighbors and constituents that you would like to represent you. So it's very much about the people. There are 5 basic legal principles that guide this redistricting process, and those are the principles that we will follow strictly while we conduct this. The first being your home rule charter. That's going to determine how many council members are being elected, how many districts we have, and then also just, the voting system that's currently in place for the city of Beaumont. Second, you have the constitutional principle of one person, one vote that requires relatively equal population amongst the districts, as I said earlier, and we'll get a little bit deeper into that as the slide goes on. You also have Section 2 of the U.S. Voting Rights Act. There's a lot of power in the Voting Rights Act. One of those things that it does is guides this redistricting process so as to give minority voters the same ability to elect representatives as any of their neighbors. Fourth, we have the Shaw versus Reno line of cases, which allows us to take into consideration race, but not so much as to where it subjects the traditional redistricting criteria and subordinates that at the expense of race. While we will use race as one of the measures or one of the tools in helping redistrict the city of Beaumont, it'll be done with other traditional criteria that has been observed by case law in other cities. And that will be in your resolutions, in which you will have a chance to look at before you vote on them before the next council meeting. Lastly, we have the Texas election laws. The election code requires us to have any electoral system or plan in place at least 3 months before the next election in which it would be used. For this case, the absolute drop deadline date would be August 8th, but we're planning to wrap this process up well before then to give us time to let the council members, constituents, and even incumbents know where they're running from before that time to file a place for a ballot on the application. As I said, starting with your city charter, what it requires is 6 council members and the mayor, so everybody gets a vote. It's composed of 4 wards in which 1 council member is elected from each of those wards, and then 2 council members elected at large. The one person, one vote constitutional principle is derived from Supreme Court cases of Baker versus Carr and Reynolds versus Sims. And as I said, it essentially requires that each of these wards that are composed of are substantially equal population. This allows for everybody's vote to count substantially the same. You're not having one district or one ward that has an enormous amount of population and their votes are getting watered down as compared to a ward that may be smaller and have lesser people to vote, so each vote counts more. This doesn't require exact population or exact equal population, but substantially equal. And the way that we measure that is a tool or measurement called the total maximum deviation. By case law and the criteria that's been established, you're not supposed to have a deviation of more than 10% from your largest district and your smallest district. What we compare that to is an ideal sized ward, and that's essentially taking your total population and dividing it by the number of wards that you have, which would be 4. And you'll see the number as we go through in some of the charts and tables that we've prepared. Here we have section 2. And one of the big things that we're looking at is giving each of the minority groups and demographic groups, for that matter, an opportunity to participate in the political process. Everybody's vote is counting the same, and everybody's having the same opportunity to represent or elect representatives from their own community and own neighborhood even. One of the things that we must avoid is the terms called cracking and packing, also referred to as fracturing under the U.S. Voting Rights Act. What that is, the practice of drawing these lines in a way that it would put a minority group in a position to where they can't achieve the same amount of, I would say, ability to elect representatives. It's 2 distinct ways in which we'll be able to look at, and you'll see in these next few slides. Now, this is just one option of how districts could be drawn. As you see, there's 4 districts. This is not necessarily the perfect scenario, but it's just an illustration of how it could be drawn. What you will notice in all of these next 3 slides or next 2 slides is that the color of the shirts and the people, they remain in the same place. But what you'll see will change is the actual drawing of the lines in the districts to kind of illustrate what cracking and packing looks like under Section 2 of the U.S. Voting Rights Act. So cracking, as you could see, if you're paying attention to the red minority group, which is represented by 15 people, you're seeing that rather than kind of being put in a district or drawn in a way to where they could possibly have a plurality or majority amongst that district, they're fractured amongst all of the districts, thereby diluting the voting power from that group. If a challenge is to come to the redistricting plan, and the courts look at why you've drawn the districts in that way. If they determine that is predominantly race that is used, that will invalidate that redistricting plan. So we must avoid cracking any of the minority powers across these wards. Sort of in the opposite, we have packing. As I said, none of the positions or colors of the shirts changed, but rather where they are drawn on this map and illustration. Here you're seeing, rather than kind of being spread out to where you might have a plurality or majority in 1 or 2 districts, the focus and concentration of the red shirts is in this one green district up here, thereby in some way reducing the power that it could have had across multiple wards. So as we go through this process with each map that we produce, we make sure to look at these data demographics, looking at how they change from the initial assessment to what is the population in each of the districts, by each of the demographics, so that we're making sure not to reduce if there's a majority minority group in a ward, and making sure those powers are maintained. As I said, the Shaw versus Reno line of cases that also guide this process stand for the notion that race may be considered as one of the many factors in this redistricting process. However, at the moment that it becomes the predominant factor, it's under strict scrutiny should it be challenged by anybody and taken up into the courts. One thing that kind of, illustrates that type of consideration would be bizarrely shaped wards. If they're weird, if they're not contiguous, if they're just picking up islands so as to pick up a population or a certain demographic, those might be reasons for challenging or looking at this type of challenge. Just taking a basic look at the Texas census statistics, you're seeing that coming in right at under 30 million. Texas is growing. You're seeing some of the demographics are changing, namely with the Hispanic population, slowly creeping up to become a plurality in the state of Texas. More specifically here in the city of Beaumont, you're seeing a total population of about 115,000. That's a slight decrease from the 2010 census, which had you at about 118,000 people. The demographic makeup is shown as here, seeing about 28.23% white population, 17.8% in the Hispanic population, 46.8% in the black population, and so on and so forth. And each of these categories is just showing that specific race or demographic alone. So white means white and non-Hispanic. If we look at the breakdowns of each of the wards, you can see how big each ward is in comparison to the target size of an ideal ward. Now, that target size is 28,807 citizens per ward. You're able to see that Ward 2 is the largest ward and Ward 4 is the smallest. So that's where you're going to see most of the change. The good thing about the way that the city of Beaumont is constructed, Ward 2 and Ward 4 are near each other. So therefore, some of the population will be coming out of 2, and going into Ward 4. Now, you will probably see some change in Ward 1 as well, because if we were to just leave that by itself, even with the current makeup, districts 1 and 3 would be over that total deviation of 10%, like we talked about. So you'll see probably some options where each of the wards are changing, and we'll vote on whatever is the desire of the council. This is just another representation of those numbers and statistics and how the wards are stacked up against each other and against that 28,000 number, which is the ideal sized ward. With all of this information, what we've put together is that measurement that we talked about at the beginning, which shows the total deviation cannot be more than 10%. The city of Beaumont's current total deviation, as it is now, is 29.23%. So we have to do a little bit of shifting and changing to where we can get underneath that 10% permissible value. So what now? We actually do what I consider is the fun part. It's the passing of the criteria and then beginning with the map drawing. First, though, like I said, the criteria that we've put together in the resolutions will help guide and establish the process for putting together these street changes and district or ward changes. We've provided a draft of that, and you can take a look at it, see if there's anything that you might want to add or take out of that. Then next, as I said, we'll send out an illustrative map. We do have the first illustrative available, and you'll be receiving that this week. It'll just be our initial attempt at trying to redraw the districts and abide by all of those criteria, which will be set in those resolutions that we passed. From there, the civic approach, this is a very civic involved project and process. So determining how we post notices, whether we do town hall meetings, where we have, one or two public hearings. That's going to be very important to making sure the citizens are aware of this process that's going on. And then obviously the map drawing. Our demographer that we have on staff has a software that's very intuitive. We also offer demos in case you want to see how it works. As he goes in and changes the streets and districts, you can see the numbers populating and updating, so you can see the effect that each of these changes will have live and in real time. After we've considered a few of the draft maps, we'll obviously put it up for council consideration and vote for that to be adopted. After all of this is considered, what our firm offers is a final report consisting of all of the correspondence, all of the meetings, agendas, everything that we do from day one until the very last day, so that you have a file on hand that tells you exactly what we consider, what we've done, and something that's legally defensible should any challenges arise. But, that's also done in the place of Section 5 of the U.S. Voting Rights. It was, there was a time in where you had to pre-clear all of your annexations, movements, redistricting processes. That's been struck down by the court case, I believe it is County versus Holder. And it doesn't require us to send in those pre-clearance plans to the government anymore. But as a firm, what we try to do is make sure we still abide by those principles. The same type of report that we would have provided for pre-clearance is the type of report that we're providing to the council. Just talking briefly about the redistricting criteria that we have typically put in the resolutions, you see that one of the main focuses is obviously the communities of interest, maintaining those, having districts and neighborhoods being represented by the wards that they were historically represented by, taking in the consideration parks, schools, things of that nature. We try as best we can to keep whole voting precincts when possible. The smallest level in which we can manipulate the streets is at a census block level. The next biggest would be the voting precinct level. We try our best to use voting precincts rather than the census blocks, but there are times in which it's not feasible to use a whole block, and we have to go in and use the smaller census. We try to make sure that everything is compact and contiguous as neat as possible, not having those islands that we talked about, not drawing council members out of their districts, obviously not cracking or packing, and then getting below that 10% maximum deviation that we talked about. For the citizens, we just require that anything that they submit as far as a map, it be written as best as possible. They try to show the total population and voting demographics that we also would provide. There will be an established deadline for when those maps would be need to be submitted, but that does not restrict how the citizens can comment and have input on these maps. We ask that they redistrict the entire city should they submit a map that they would want the council to consider. Whereas, you could do your favorite ward or the ward you live in. That has an effect amongst the whole city. And so we would ask that you try to redistrict the entire city. Now, like I said, with our demographer, we've literally taken a crude map, and somebody took an initial assessment of ours and just drew red lines on it where they would have liked to see the district's changes. We were able to accommodate that and show them what that would look like as far as the data and demographics. So we're pretty flexible in working with any type of commentary or submission that citizens might have. As I said, the civic engagement, we're big on making sure notices are posted appropriately and in the right places, utilizing the city's social media and website, making sure that the notices, maps, and criteria are all up on there. In the past, I have done town hall meetings where, we've discussed and done this similar type of training for the general public. So those are things that, you might consider as far as how we involve all of the citizens and make sure this process is as smooth as possible. This is a rough timeline that is subject to change, but it hits the highlights of the dates that we need to be looking at. The first proposed The proposed first public hearing is scheduled for June 28th. The latest day that we would like to see that adoption of this map would be July 19th. That's a little bit before that first day to file for a place on the ballot. So each of the council members, incumbents, or just candidates know where they'll be running from. As I said, that absolute drop dead date is August 8th by the election code, in which the plan has to be adopted.
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
The last, on the slide
Go
before,
back to the slide.
Yes, sir.
last day to file for place on the ballot, last day to order election for November 26th.
We have a May election, not a November.
Okay, yes, so they'll be adopted or changed to reflect that May timeline. This is in the instance that it was in November. I think with that being the next general election for, things outside of the city, it'd still be a good date or timeline to follow just to make sure we're in place for that next May election. This timeline, it obviously depends on, the number of maps requested. We've talked with city staff and understand that, possibly more maps are wanted rather than more meetings, and we can accommodate that. It also depends on the willingness to have special meetings and the number of public hearings we plan to have. As of right now, we've scheduled for one, but, depending on the involvement, we can schedule more. And at this time, I'll take any questions that any of the council members may have.
Any questions?
I just wanted to be clear, the November election was to approve like the redistricting maps, not for election purposes. I don't know if that was, when he said we don't have a November election, I think it was the purpose to approve the redistricting maps, not necessarily to approve, to elect you guys.
No, this is for midterms.
Yeah.
Thank you for the clarification.
I just simply wanted to say, preserve, protect, pass it on. Great job with your presentation.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
And
Mr.
just to clarify, I know he mentioned the citizen maps due on June 3rd. And we did send those letters out to community leaders, and then we will be approving resolutions and criteria at the May 17th meeting.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank
you. Great job. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you. And we'll take you up on the food
Sounds good.
comment. That does conclude our presentations and proclamations. At this time, I would like to read, at the close of the city council meeting, the council will hold an executive session to consider matters related to contemplated or pending litigation in accordance with section 551.071 of the Government Code, Torrey Frazier versus City of Beaumont, cause number E206919, and also to consider matters related to the deliberation of the purchase, exchange, lease, or value of real property in accordance with section 551.072 of the Government Code, to which specifically states land owned by the City of Beaumont at 701-555 Main, Beaumont, Jefferson County, Texas, and to discuss and/or deliberate economic development negotiations in accordance with section 551.087 of the Government Code, to which specifically Project Riverfront.
Mayor, I have a question.
Yes.
On the Riverfront executive session items, I would like to make the request that unless we're gonna talk about T's and C's of a contract, that we have these discussions down here in the public.
Mayor, I agree with Councilmember Neal. If we're going to be talking about 555 Main Street, other than the contractual provisions that may exist, this involves millions of public taxpayer dollars. And just because we have the right to have something in executive session doesn't make it always the right thing to do. And in the interest of transparency, I think that discussion should be held downstairs as well.
Can I clarify my request? Because I want to make sure that, I don't know if he was saying the same thing that I said. If it's a T and C of a contract, then I have no issue having those discussions upstairs. But as far as the plan and the vision and what we're doing, I think that we need to do that out in the public.
Yeah, we're on the same page.
Okay, so are you making a motion?
I don't know the proper procedure for that.
So, Mayor, just to clarify, is that for today's executive session or moving forward?
I would say for today and moving forward.
Okay.
So council,
So I guess our question is there anything being discussed that needs to be done in executive session? Or is this primarily focusing on vision and so forth?
So, just to clarify, the purpose of today's executive session is to discuss possible sale and or lease of city property, including discussions of economic development opportunities. So, again, you could do that kind of discussion in public, but you have the right to do it in executive session. The idea behind that is, and the city attorney can weigh in on this as well, is when you're discussing the terms of the possible sale or lease of property, that could impact your bargaining position as you move forward. That could impact neighboring property. And so the reason behind that, I believe, is the wisdom behind why the state legislature allows us to meet an executive on items like this is so that y'all can discuss in private about essentially offers of sale or lease of city property. Now, eventually it would, if the issue were to move forward, of course, it would be, let's say, a lease or a sale of city property. It would be in public, of course. But the purpose of this and your ability to do it in executive session is to allow y'all to discuss these terms, the potential offer, the individuals involved in the sale in executive session in private. So,
Does that impact you in any way?
Yeah, I mean,
Or does that change your position at all?
no, it doesn't change my opinion. My concern is that, this thing continues to go back and forth and has gone back and forth for far too long. And I think that the citizens deserve to know where we as a council stand on this thing. And I don't support continuing to have these executive session discussions whenever we have a legal right to have them down here in front of the public.
Mayor. And so, Councilmember Neal, I appreciate what you just said, and I agree. The whole deal here is that a few weeks ago, there was a vote taken. I wasn't here. My wife was in surgery. There was a vote taken to proceed with issuing a demolition contract for the former AT&T building. And things have changed since then. There has been people come out and make overtures to the city. And the staff, the administration, needs to know consensus of council whether or not we're going to continue along the path of demolishing that building, if there's still a consensus to do that, or if, based on circumstances, that has changed. And that's a discussion that the public is going to be incredibly interested in. It involves millions of their dollars. And I don't have to name names of potential investors, and I'm not. But that is a discussion that is appropriate to be held downstairs, and we have the right to have it down here. And if we need to make a motion, or if you're making a motion, I'll second it.
Well, and I don't even know who put the item on the agenda to be discussed today.
In reference to the 55 Main, that was put on by staff at the request of council in asking for a review of the contract. And we did reach out to the previous owner in regards to a provision that would have prevented council from doing anything other than tearing the building down. So the purpose of that is to discuss the counter offer that was received by the previous owner as it relates to that provision of the contract. So that one isn't to talk about, that one is a contractual matter.
And I support having that discussion upstairs. But
Yeah, we're looking for, could you give us direction on your recommendation, not knowing what all is going to be said, as our attorney, can you tell us, in this particular situation, what would you recommend? I agree with Councilman Neal. Transparency is always appropriate, especially in regards to vision and development. But in this situation, what is your recommendation?
So as it relates to the items that deal with the AT&T building, again, that is a contractual matter, and I recommend that that one be discussed in executive session, just because we're not talking about development. We're just solely talking about that one contractual provision that council asked staff to try to renegotiate. And so there were some counters presented in that discussion that council may want to counter back. That individual's attorney's present. I don't know if you want to waive your attorney-client privilege and have that discussion out front. And then secondly, without knowing what the riverfront project entails, you know, as the city manager alluded to, there are some things that the council may not want to discuss publicly as it relates to tax incentives or deals or breaks or whatever that could be offered or ensued in that property. As it relates, I guess, Councilman, as it relates to design and I guess the spending or expenditures of money, that you guys are totally entitled to have that conversation up front. Presentations as it relates to that, totally. But as it relates to anything that could potentially impact negotiation powers, I would always recommend that be discussed upstairs.
Mayor.
Thank you, Council.
Councilmember Felshaw and Ms. Reed. So, to my way of thinking, unless there's some direction given to the administration to go in a different way, we don't even need to talk about the contractual matters, because as it sits right now, the last instruction that the administration was given was to proceed with demolition. We all know, and it's a matter of public knowledge, that in the contract to buy the building back from Mr. Flanagan, there was a provision put in there saying that if the city does not demolish the building, he has a right to purchase the building back for the same amount we paid for it. That's out there. So that's the contractual provision that we're talking about. But we don't even need to reach that unless there's at least 4 council members that are wanting to look at going in a different direction on demolishing the building.
So without discussing items that were discussed in executive session, staff was directed by, or staff did receive a direction by council to look at getting that position removed to see if it was beneficial to even consider other options. And so that was the purpose for doing that. So we didn't, so that's why. So we did receive a consensus of council.
Yeah, and we have heard back, and we can talk about all that upstairs. But again, there's not really a purpose to talk about that unless, you know, we
There
decide.
is.
Okay, well,
I believe there is reason to discuss it, but I would have to agree with Councilmember Neal, Councilmember Getz, that we want to be as transparent as possible. We want to do it in public, and I would definitely support doing design and moving forward publicly. Again, this is taxpayers' dollars. These are not our dollars. We want to do it to make sure that the public knows what's going on, how we're moving forward, and how we're spending these dollars. But at this point, for us to move forward with contractual items, I would definitely yield to our attorney counsel to have it in executive session.
Madam Mayor?
Councilmember Samuel.
Yes. It's my understanding the decision about what to be done with the property, that decision has been made. That was a vote on that. There was a direction of council to find out if the terms of the contract could be amended. And that's what this executive session is regarding, the contractual agreement that was made and whether that has been changed. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Right.
And that is the purpose of the executive session, not to discuss the parameters of the building itself, but the contract.
Yes, sir. So there, as Mr. Councilman Getz mentioned, there's an article in the contract that prohibits the city from selling the property or doing anything other than demoing it without the property reverting back to the previous owner. And staff was directed to reach out to the previous owner to get that provision.
And that's what
renegotiated.
we're discussing.
Yes.
And that's not appropriate for downstairs. That is for executive session because that is contractual.
Correct.
Well, Mayor, if I may, and this is for you, Ms. Reed. If we're going to demolish the building, that contractual provision doesn't even come into play because
Correct.
that contractual provision only comes into play if we're not going to demolish the building. So it seems to me that the logical thing that you have to do is decide, are we going to demolish the building or not? Councilmember Samuel said we've already voted on it. Well, there was a vote to issue a contract to demolish the building. My understanding is that contract has not yet been signed, and we can always rescind a contract.
So
But
it's my understanding that it was awarded. I don't know that we've sent it out based on the other, I guess, inconsistent direction from council to kind of look at this provision. So it hasn't been.
The purchase order has not been issued, but the administration has been given the will of the council, which is bring the building down. That's where we stand.
And so without changing that decision of council and having that done publicly, see where we all stand, the administration is going to follow through with its last marching orders. If there's going to be new marching orders given based on a change of circumstances, then we need to have that conversation. And I agree with Councilmember Neal, that conversation needs to be downstairs.
And in fairness, we couldn't even with the way it's posted, we couldn't vote on it. You guys could discuss it, but it wouldn't be appropriate for a vote today.
Right, I understand.
And I want to make that clear.
I understand. We can't vote on it
Yes,
because it's not posted that way, but
Yes,
it
sir.
can be discussed and administration can see if there's a consensus to go in a different
So
direction.
if you guys want to just, I guess, talk specifically about what the the future of the building is, you could obviously do that publicly, but I wouldn't recommend discussing any of the contractual terms down here. That's all I'm
But
saying.
in order to discuss it, it's going to come into
Well,
conversation, the contract.
let's just split the baby. If council wanted to go upstairs and talk about the contractual obligations and what that would look like, and if you felt like those terms were fair and you wanted to go ahead and accept that, and there was a shift in the council saying that now they have these opportunities and you wanted to come back downstairs and have an open discussion on an item as it relates to what to do with the building next, you could do that. You just couldn't vote.
Right. Yeah.
Because our decision to move forward, or excuse me, the decision to not tear down the building is contingent upon this that you're discussing now.
No,
No.
I don't know.
no,
No.
no.
They're connected is what I'm saying.
Yes, sir, they're connected.
They're
They're connected,
Yes,
so
sir,
we
yeah.
can't make a decision without first hearing what you have to say.
I wouldn't recommend you making a decision
Okay.
without hearing first.
But my point was, and I think this just proved my point, there's a lot more to this thing than the T's and C's of a contract. That I think, in fairness to the citizens, that these discussions need to be had down here.
Well, I do agree there's a lot more than just the A's and B's of the contract. However, a decision has been made, and it wasn't made upon any contingency upon whether the contract could be amended or not. There were some folks who wanted to understand whether we had the opportunity to get out of the contract. That did not state there was a move or a consensus from the council to change our direction based on whether that was done. I'll leave it at that, but this is clear. It's clear that until it's done, there will be a fight until the finish by some. If you want to do that and we can discuss it downstairs. It doesn't matter to me, but this is just another opportunity for someone to attempt to get what they want. And the decision has been made, but if this council wants to entertain that, so be it.
So at this
Mayor,
point.
Mayor, one more thing, please. You know what I want? I want what I hope everybody else wants. I want downtown to be able to flourish. I would like to see restaurants downtown. I would like to see people living downtown. We have
Ma'am,
an
please
opportunity.
don't, please do not.
We have an opportunity now with a potential investor to make that happen. And that has come about in the last few weeks.
Now, see, now we're discussing something outside the agenda.
I'm
of
discussing something that involves 555 Main, and I'm saying this is something we all want to see happen.
If we want to discuss that down here, let's make that decision. But
Well,
that's
Because
not
now
on the agenda.
because now we're in a discussion for the question that Councilmember Neal has said. So at this point, right now, we have an executive session that is scheduled for today. And at this point, we need to decide if we're going to move forward with today's executive session for the contract agreement. Or are we going to cancel it and then come back and then do it publicly?
I'm all for talking about the T's and C's of the contract upstairs, but I'm not talking about all this other stuff up there.
Absolutely.
Down here in front of the public.
We're
So can
talking
we-
about a
can-
contract today. The executive session order is for the contract agreement.
Well, then
Case
let's
and
not go out there
close.
and talk about all the rest of this stuff then.
Not a problem.
Can we ask that an agenda item be prepared for next week perhaps to talk about all of, everything other than the contract?
Let's go upstairs and talk about the T's and C's of the contract. We'll come back down here and do it today.
I'm okay with that. Let's do that.
Okay? Is that a motion, or? I think it's a consensus to go upstairs.
Yeah, it's publicly posted, so if you guys, when you adjourn, if you want to go upstairs and come back downstairs, you have the right to do so. So
Okay.
you just need to make the announcement that council will discuss the following items downstairs and then come back and discuss the other
I don't
items.
want to hold the public to us going upstairs because we never know how long that's going to be. So let's get through the agenda today, go upstairs for the executive session,
Yes.
and then if we need to, we can come back down. Okay?
Clarity, Mayor, you have to tell them if we're gonna come back down, because for those that want to stay, they're entitled to stay. So if we're gonna come back down for discussion,
I have a question.
we need
for
to
me.
say that we're gonna come back down for discussion because they're entitled to be here for that.
Absolutely.
Yes, ma'am.
Following proper procedure, it would be appropriate for us to complete the agenda as printed and published. And we can then go up, and there's nothing to come back, there's no action item left
not
on the
action
agenda.
item.
So there will be no reason for
For
us
us
to
to
go
come
into
back.
executive session and come back down.
So
It
if-
would have to be posted later for further discussion about that building. Am I
And we
correct?
can discuss that, and we can post it.
if you wanted to do further discussion, but what council was asking is that if we discuss anything outside the T's and C's, if you want it, because it's posted for discussion in executive session, it's posted
For a contract.
for a contract. Yes.
So yeah, that's fine.
So we're going upstairs to discuss the contract only.
Yes, ma'am.
We will not be coming back downstairs, okay? Thank you.
We're moving forward with the agenda.
We're moving
as
forward with the
printed.
agenda
So
as printed.
we will not discuss this last part of the executive session,
Yes, we
Project
will.
Riverfront. We will be discussing that
Yes.
also?
We are
Only the
going
contractual
to, only
portion.
the contractual portion of it.
But what
As
I'm saying is,
posted.
it's two different executive sessions discussion. They had one about 701 to 5 about the property, and then they had the last one under it about Project Riverfront, which they all coincide. But they saying they don't want to discuss anything about the Project Riverfront. So are we going to discuss it up there or not?
I'm not discussing it upstairs.
We're gonna discuss the contract, the contractual
The
agreement.
bottom one we're not going to talk about.
So the bottom one, we will not talk
We
about.
will be coming back down here after executive session and talking about.
No, we will not.
Why
Where are
not?
we gonna do it at?
We're just gonna have
Do it
to
at the next one.
do it on our next council meeting.
I don't support
I
that.
don't agree with that.
Okay, my question is this Project Riverfront, is that dealing with 555?
Yes, sir. But you can do the discussion of the contract in executive today just under the first item. So if you want to strike the second item, that would be fine. It would still encompass everything we need to discuss today.
I don't want to strike the second item. I'd like to have a discussion downstairs. Is Project Riverfront what's going to happen at 555 Main? Is that what that is supposed to be?
Project Riverfront is a economic development proposal, which includes 555 Main. So it encompasses 555 Main. However, if the consensus is to only discuss the contract, the proposed contract for the possible lease or sale of city property, then that could be accomplished in executive under the first item only.
Okay. Well, Mayor, I'm okay with talking about everything outside of the contract downstairs. I support that. That's what I'd like to see happen. And whether it's today or next week, it doesn't matter. But I do think that's important. It's not fair for the administration not to be giving clear direction on what the consensus of council is. If that consensus has changed, then they need to know, because otherwise they're going to need to go forward with, issuing the contract and demolishing the building.
Well, I believe staff did what was requested of them. It's just that once I read this and we got up here, council changed. I don't think staff changed. Staff did what was requested. So Councilmember Neal said that he did not want to discuss 555 Main and the economic development of Riverfront in executive session. Am I correct? You said you will not discuss
I'm not gonna go up there.
development.
No, I think we've had enough of these meetings upstairs, and that the citizens deserve to know where we as a council stand on these items. And that if it's not a T and C of the contract, I want to have the discussions publicly.
No problem. But effective at the end of the council meeting, we will deliberate in executive session the contractual agreement. Correct? Correct. Only. Not the development of Riverfront Park. Only the contractual agreement.
Here's where I struggle, Mayor.
But you've already told us, Mike,
Okay.
several times
Okay.
where you stand. I know where you stand.
Okay.
I'm trying to move forward.
Okay.
We have audience sitting here waiting for us to move forward.
Okay.
So in executive session, we're going to move forward with the contractual agreement. Correct, everyone?
Only.
Only.
So the only question was, do we come back down to discuss the development, economic development, or do we postpone that to another day?
We'll just postpone it to another day, because according to this today, we're going to stick with contractual agreement.
I don't understand that last part. Why can't, I'm not trying to be difficult, but they're two different agenda items.
They are.
And if one of the, first we have the right to discuss anything downstairs that we want.
Absolutely.
And the Riverfront, Project Riverfront
It's posted at the bottom.
It's
is posted at the bottom. Why couldn't we discuss that downstairs?
Because we don't have to come back down after we recess for executive session. It can be moved to our next meeting
Okay.
so that it can be publicly discussed as you want, as Councilmember Neal wants.
Okay.
Okay?
Yeah, I support the public as well.
And I do support publicly addressing it in public so that the citizens will know.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we got that solved. Oh, my God.